Hello, welcome to First Chapter Friday. I'm Miss Andy, and this week I am going to read the first chapter of Elf Dog and Owlhead by M.T. Anderson, published by Thorndike Press. I loved this book. I know you will too. It is beautifully illustrated throughout, and it starts like this. Chapter 1. It was Monday, so they were hunting worms in the petrified forest. That's what the Queen under the mountain always scheduled for Mondays. The pack of elf hounds bounded past stone trees, barking and howling. They poured through the wood like a tide. Behind them rode dukes and duchesses, lords and ladies. Servants and sorcerers, huntsmen blew huge curling horns. They chased a worm that was old and clever. She slithered over boulders and under fallen trees of metal, glancing back to see if she had lost the elf hounds yet. Several times they paused to catch the scent of her again. They sniffed the cavern air. Then one of the dogs spotted the flick of the worm's tail, barking warning, and plunged after the monster. The whole pack followed. The whole pack except for one. She was a young elf hound, slim and elegant with bright, sharp eyes. She held back. She watched the other dogs surge forward. Her eye was caught by movement far off to the side, up a hill of marble oak trees with spreading branches. She had seen the worm's children, squiggly baby worms. The mother was leading the dog pack away from them on purpose so her children could escape. The elf hound watched the infant worms flee unnoticed. The lords and ladies rode up behind the elf hound. They would reward her if she led the whole royal hunt to the fleeing young. "What's wrong with this one?" asked one of the knights. "She's just standing there." "She'd be one of our best dogs," said the master of the hunt, "if she wasn't always dreaming of something else." "Well," said a duke, "force her to get moving. She should join the rest of the pack." "Go, girl," yelled the master of the hunt, and he kicked out at her with his boot to let her know who was boss. The elegant elf hound stared at him coldly. He didn't deserve to know what she'd seen. Almost smiling, she started after the pack again, barking as loudly as she could, as if she'd never noticed the young worm elves scrambling to safety up the hill. As if she'd never figured out the old worm's plan, leading the hunt away from the precious young. She reached the pack, hopping over huge mushrooms and shelves of fungus. Easily she soared past the stragglers. The people under the mountain kept the petrified forest stocked with worms and basilisks and other hungry beasts, just so they could hunt them without having to risk going above ground. Outside the caves above the mountain, the woods were deeper and wider, but sometimes haunted by humans. Usually, the elf hounds only got to hunt in these 2 square miles of cavern, seeking out monsters that had been bred by their masters for sport. But the old blue worm was leading the pack out of the familiar tunnels and caves. The dogs could tell she was leading them upward. "Smart old cow," said one of the dukes. "Should we let her get out of the caves? Shall we follow her? Or shall I order the gates slammed shut? What do you think?" "Good day for a hunt," said a count, squinting after the worm through his rune-covered monocle. "Let's go above ground, hunt her up there. It'll be good for the elf hounds to have a change of scene. We have the wizards with us. They can hide us from the humans." And so, with great horns blaring behind them, the pack tumbled up the passage that led out of the petrified forest, out of the caverns, and into the bright sunlight of the forest above ground. The old worm flung herself along, delighted. She had saved her children, and she herself might escape into this new bright world. She just had to lead the dogs a little farther. Then she'd give them the slip. Outside it was spring, and the woods were just starting to turn green. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the sun picked out the red riding jackets of the knights and lords and ladies and the gems on their swords and tridents. Their wizards rode to either side of the hunt, cranking magical machines that sputtered out smoke. The people under the mountain only lived half in the world of humans, as if they had stepped with one leg into another time or an unseen place. The smoke would make them completely invisible if they stumbled across any humans lost in the woods. The dog pack was wild with excitement. They rarely got to visit the world outside the palaces and parks in the caverns under the mountain. Some of them were afraid of the light. Some of them were worried that there were no walls of rock to protect them. They just bounded forward and tried to focus on the retreating worm. But the young dog with the sharp eyes was fascinated by everything she saw and wanted to see more. She was trained to explore the forests and learn their secret ways. She wanted to investigate this sparkling woodland that lay on the top side of the mountain, where she saw colors she had never seen before. Graykin, the young dog's uncle, was close on the worm's tail. He was a prize elfhound, a leader of the pack. The worm reared up and slashed at him. He ducked back. The dogs were all around the worm then. They did not know that she was trying to protect her young. They only knew that they had been trained to kill beasts like her for the amusement of their masters. They barked furiously. Kind of like that. Except the young and elegant elfhound, who had spotted something she had never seen before. It was the back of a gas station. It was made of cement blocks. The woods went right up to it. Her Uncle Graykin caught her eye. What was she doing? She should start barking, screaming. She should prepare to leap and tear at the scaly monster. The worm was cornered. Behind her was a road, a highway. Humans drove past in cars, unaware that a few inches from their windows, a great and bloody battle was about to begin. The dogs closed in. It looked like several of them were about to die in the fight. The people under the mountain did not care. They had plenty of dogs. Growling, the pack closed in, step by step. The worm swung her front claws. She snapped at them. The dogs' muscles twitched. They were ready to leap. The huntsman blew the horn, the signal for the kill. And the worm threw herself backward and hurtled across the road, swaying her long blue body to eel between speeding cars. The dogs just stood there, astonished, their mouths open. A few still remembered to bark. They saw the worm jump up on top of a van with a loud thump. Then they saw her leap off the other side into the safety of the woods there. The van swerved. The driver must have heard the thump and maybe even caught a glimpse, out of the corner of their eye, of flashing blue scales. There was a lot of honking. The dukes and duchesses and knights and ladies all were angry. They had wanted to see a spectacular fight. Now the worm had escaped, and the dogs couldn't reach her over the tide of humans in their vehicles. The hunt was over. The Duke made a sign to the huntsman, who blew a retreat on his horn. The people under the mountain turned their horses around slowly and headed back toward the entrance to the cave, muttering angrily. The dogs still barked at the worm across the busy highway. A chihuahua in a truck barked back, furious, but no one else could hear them. The hunting horns blew again. From the highway, the car horns honked. The dogs knew it was time to go home. One by one, they turned tail and trotted toward their masters. The mystical fog drifted through the trees, growing fainter. Soon the spring breeze blew it away completely. It was as if the hunt had never happened. Except there was one dog left behind, the young, elegant elfhound with the sharp eye. She was standing in the middle of the gas station parking lot inspecting cars. She had never seen cars before. They smelled strange. She had never smelled plastic before, and she'd only smelled gasoline when the queen under the mountain went up in her flying machine. The door to the gas station opened with a jingle. The most incredible smells wafted out. The elfhound was used to being served food in a golden bowl in her kennel far beneath the earth, but she had never smelled pizza before. This surely was a food so royal that the queen herself had never dined upon it. "Look at the dog," said a little girl. "She's pretty. Wonder where her owner is," said a father, looking around the parking lot. At this, the elfhound realized that she had fallen far behind her pack. She looked around startled. She had planned to catch up with them. Time to run. She sprinted away from the gas station and the highway and back into the forest. She ran through spruce woods and pine woods and a stand of maples. She ran to the bottom of the mountain. It was almost night when she got there. She sniffed at the ground, following the scent of her brothers and sisters. She smelled the horses of the royal hunt. Their track led right up to a huge cliff face. Then it stopped. But wasn't that where they had come out? Hadn't they all tumbled out into the sunlight in exactly this spot? But now time and magic and the curtain between worlds had shifted, and the door was not there anymore. The dog huffed deep in her throat, irritated to be left behind. She walked back and forth through the underbrush, sniffing. They were gone, all of her back. Her brothers and sisters, her parents and the aunts and her uncles and Uncle Graykin, they were all gone deep under the mountain, and she had no way to follow them. She pawed at the blank stone. Her claws scratched across the granite. Deep in her throat, for the first time in her life, she whimpered, but no one would come for her. She was all alone, trapped in the world above ground. That is just the first chapter. I'm going to give you a snippet of chapter 2, just a snippet, because you definitely want to find out a little bit more of the setting. There is no dumber game to play alone than Frisbee. That is what Clay was thinking as he was walking through the forest with a Frisbee. He was alone. There was a virus all across the country and the world. Pretty much everything had shut down. Even school was closed. None of his friends were allowed to come over. He could play with his sisters, but he would rather die in a pit than do that. His little sister Juniper was a know-it-all, and his big sister Derosi spent all of her time playing war games online, hogging the computer. Clay hadn't seen his best friend Levi for a couple of months. He didn't have anyone to kick around a ball with, or build stuff with, or throw a Frisbee with. As he walked along through the forest, he tried a game where he threw the Frisbee straight up. Maybe he could perfect the flick of a wrist, so when he saw Levi again, he would be a Frisbee master. The Frisbee sliced upward above the tops of the pines. It spun there for a second in the sun, wobbled, and then fell helter-skelter back down toward the ground. Clay ran to grab it out of the air. It clunked him on the head. Then it flopped over into the moss. Clay bent to pick it up. He was kind of glad no one saw. It was better to practice being a Frisbee master alone, except it felt like someone had seen. Clay looked around the clearing. He felt watched. He did not notice behind him the glint of blue scales. He did not hear the 6 crooked claws pacing toward him across the moss. But somehow he felt the glare of the large golden eyes on his back. I'm going to stop there because I know you want to read more. You're going to love this. Check it out from the Alameda Free Library. This is Elf, Dog, and Owl Head by M.T. Anderson. See you next time.